When my ex-husband ran into me and saw my son 15 years ago, he left me because he believed I was infertile. He shuddered. That fortuitous meeting was only the start of a turbulent journey in which long-forgotten secrets are revealed and undiscovered facts cast doubt on all of his preconceived notions about the past, present, and future. Catherine was waiting for the waiter who would shortly deliver her lunch on a sunny afternoon while seated alone at a restaurant table by the window and enjoying the lovely weather. Catherine had no idea what kind of unexpected encounter she would shortly experience. Catherine knocked into a boy walking down the hallway as she got up to use the restroom. Though Catherine promptly apologized to the youngster, she was taken aback to see someone from her past when she glanced at the man who was with him. The man was Catherine's ex-husband Michel, whom she hadn't seen in 15 years since their split. Catherine was a little surprised by the unexpected meeting, and as he drew nearer, a wave of unease surged through her. Still, she remained composed and greeted him with grace. Michel and Catherine had always desired to become parents, and they had been attempting to become pregnant but had not been successful since the start of their marriage. Years went by, and the much-loved goal of having children never materialized. Catherine insisted to Michel that it would be best for them to consult a doctor in order to try to determine the cause of their infertility and possibly try some treatment, as she was concerned that there might be a reason for this. But Michel, full with pride, would not leave. Given that he was from a large family and that Catherine was an only child, he assumed that Catherine was the cause of the issue. He started accusing her of being infertile, using their shared family history as a point of reference. This exacerbated their frustrations and misunderstandings until eventually their animosity led to their divorce. Even with the scars from the past still visible, Catherine made the decision to extend a polite greeting to Michel, realizing that a long time had gone since their last encounter. But her demeanor was in stark contrast to Michel's icy and contemptuous response on finally seeing her after all these years. "Are you alone, still single, I see," Michel remarked, his gaze reflecting a mix of superiority and apathy towards Catherine. His remarks were oozing with arrogance. He introduced the young man beside him, making a move that suggested he felt the need to prove his claimed superiority. Saying, "This is my son, Austin," he seemed to be highlighting a personal triumph. "He's a true genius, just like my new wife, Sophie," he said, indicating to a woman seated at a different table and introducing his new family with a hint of pride in his voice. Catherine's incredulity at Michel's haughtiness was uncontrollable. She had thought that after all these years, their relationship may have evolved, but observing him act in the same manner made her realize that he was still extremely proud. But soon, Michel was going to experience something unexpected that would permanently alter his past and his family's future. A tall, amiable boy approached Catherine as they were talking. With a protective and loving sense, the kid noticed the discomfort on her face and said, "Is everything okay, Mom?" Upon seeing her kid, Catherine grinned broadly and said, "My son, of course. I'm happy you came. I had been anticipating your arrival. I happened to run across a former classmate." In return for his concern, she kissed her son tenderly on the face. "I wanted to introduce you to my son, Michel," Catherine said, grinning at Michel's expression of astonishment. "This is Nathan." But when Michel found out that Catherine was a mother of a son, he was unable to disguise his shock. The youngster's eyes expanded significantly, and he revealed a flurry of ideas that were going through his head upon realizing that the boy was already grown, perhaps 15 years old. The server entered the room and took Catherine's food, cutting Michel off before she could say anything. Taking advantage of the situation, Catherine excused herself and went to sit with her son, leaving Michel alone herself to deal with his surprising insights. His wife and kid joined Michel at the table, but his thoughts had strayed. Austin and Sophie were having a great time eating, but Michel appeared far away, his mind racing. Gripping the thought that whirled around in his mind, could Nathan be his son? His hand trembled. Was it possible that Catherine had been pregnant and had kept it a secret from him when they split up? So why would she keep it a secret from him? Michel was plagued by these questions, making it difficult for him to appreciate the occasion. His thoughts were cut off before he could find solace for his concerns as Sophie cried out to him. bringing him back to the present moment. Michel was unable to get the topic out of his head as the days passed. He hated to look for the reality that haunted him. What would Sophie's response be, then, if she learned that he was married to someone else's child? What about Austin, too? Knowing that he had an elder brother, how would he feel? An additional level of concern to his predicament was brought about by the mere notion of confronting Catherine, as he was afraid she would pursue him and demand financial support. But Michel was unable to deny the unquenchable curiosity that was pushing him to find the truth, despite all the questions and concerns that were racing through his head. How on earth could this have occurred? Michel kept asking him questions. After years of infertility and several years of unsuccessful attempts to conceive together, he was convinced Catherine was sterile. Michel's tale with Sophie had been radically dissimilar. After the divorce, he reconnected with Sophie a few years later, and the two quickly became pregnant with Austin. They made the decision to be married and start a new life together as soon as they learned of the pregnancy. Michel's confusion and reservations regarding Nathan possibly being his son were further heightened by these contradictory facts. Michel discovered a significant internal conflict. He was both desperate to know the truth and terrified of the mayhem that would break out in his life if he discovered Nathan was his son. His pride pushed him to keep up the pretense of a perfect existence with Austin and Sophie, telling himself that the arrival of Nathan and Catherine would only cause chaos and disturbance. But the longer Catherine remained silent about it, the more it attracted him. Why would she keep Nathan a secret from him? This enigma increased his uncertainties and aroused his curiosity. Sophie, meantime, started to observe her husband's cold demeanor. She was concerned since Michel always seemed to be deep in contemplation. In an attempt to find out what was bothering him, she made the decision to approach him. Finally, Michel made the decision to talk to his wife about his doubts and ideas because he had no other option and could no longer keep them to himself. Michel's worries startled Sophie, and her eyes widened a little, showing shock and fear at her husband's discoveries. "Do you think Nathan could be your son?" she asked, expressing shock and incredulity in her voice. Michel inhaled deeply as he worked up the guts to voice his suspicion. His voice was unsure as he admitted, "Yes, I think it's a possibility." With concern, Sophie furrowed her brow. "But Michel, this might throw our life into a major tailspin. Are you really so sure that finding this truth is a good idea?" Her question was delivered with obvious apprehension. Michel firmly nodded. "Sophie, I must know." With his mind made up, he firmly said, "I'll try to get a DNA test if Catherine won't give me the truth." "No, Michel, you shouldn't do that," Sophie uttered in a tone that was a little desperate. She tried to talk her husband out of it, saying, "We shouldn't get involved with them. Let's just leave the past in the past and move forward with our lives." Sophie tried her hardest to talk her husband out of looking for the truth because she thought it would be best to move on from the past. Though Michel believed she had persuaded him, she was still desperate to find out the truth. Thus, Michel made the decision to get in touch with Catherine and request to meet her despite Sophie's desires. When he called Catherine after their dinner at the restaurant, Catherine was taken aback. Remembering the haughtiness of her ex-husband, she believed she would never see him again. She turned down the invitation at first, but Michel's persistent efforts eventually persuaded her to accept, if grudgingly. "Catherine, I need to talk to you about something really important," Michel hesitantly started at first. "Ever since we met at the restaurant that day, it has been on my mind. I want to know the truth. I've been thinking about it a lot lately," he firmly said. "What's happening? What's the deal?" Catherine asked. Michel shot back, "You know damn well what I'm talking about. I'm referring to Nathan. I have a right to know whether he's my son," he yelled. "Well, that's it," Catherine said with a laugh. "That clarifies why the restaurant shocked you. What's the matter with your laughter?" Michel growled. "I have a right to know the truth." "No, Nathan is not your son," Catherine vehemently declared, offended by Michel's condescending answer. Michel persisted in asking questions since she was not happy with her response. "Who else could he be the son of?" asking Michel. You have a 15-year-old son and are single. I must have a son like him. It's beyond me how that could have happened. You couldn't conceive. You constantly make snap judgments, replied Catherine, taking offense at Michelle's remarks. You are not Nathan's father. I've previously mentioned that he is my spouse and Gregory's son, Catherine stated, shocking Michelle. Nathan is not 15 years old. Even if he is as tall as my husband, he will only be 14 years old. That he is not your son is certain, Catherine said. When we separated, I sought medical help to try to understand why I couldn't have children and maybe start treatment, she said. However, the physician declared that I was in perfect health. I could become pregnant and was in excellent health. That's exactly what took place. I became pregnant with Nathan as soon as Gregory and I tied the knot. We then had 2 further boys, Theo, who was 7 years old, and Evan, who was 10. Michelle was both genuinely curious and worried by the meeting with Catherine and the realization that Nathan was not his son. He began to doubt all he had previously believed about his own fertility and the nature of his connection with Sophie after Catherine's remarks. Michelle was furious and perplexed, trying to figure out how he, from such a big family, had only 1 child with Sophie while Catherine, whom he thought was infertile, had 3 children with her husband. Michelle ultimately made the decision to see a doctor and heed Catherine's counsel. Sophie had no idea what Michelle was doing, and he had no idea what he was about to find out. Sophie believed she had persuaded her husband to leave all of this behind. The results of the medical examinations revealed something that completely shocked Michelle: he was infertile. This revelation led to a flurry of inquiries concerning his union with Sophie. If he was sterile, how could he have borne a child with her? The basis of their partnership was called into question by this new discovery. Michelle was lost in thought for some time, wondering what this news meant and how it would affect his life and his marriage to Sophie. He was forced to reevaluate his identity and responsibilities as a spouse and father. Michelle was horrified to learn the truth about Austin while confronting Sophie in the midst of this agonizing revelation. She acknowledged that she briefly dated another man in the early years of their relationship, from whom she conceived Augustine. Michelle was devastated by the news and felt as though everything in his life had fallen apart. He had been deaf to the reality for so long because of his arrogance and faith in his own fertility. All of his preconceived ideas about his marriage and his identity as a father were called into question by the new reality he found himself in. Michelle would now need to adjust to this new revelation. With their trust shattered, he was left with the challenging task of repairing his relationship with Sophie. He would also have to face the difficulty of managing his feelings for Austin, even though he wasn't his biological son, while still treating him like his own child. Michelle's life completely changed after learning this information, but he realized he would need to figure out how to move on and start over in light of the new reality. This narrative demonstrates the need of telling the truth, no matter how painful, in order to create enduring and wholesome relationships. Building mutual respect and trust requires being honest with both oneself and others. This anecdote also serves as a helpful reminder of the significance of facing our own prejudices and pride, which can blind us to reality and make it difficult for us to see the people in our immediate vicinity for who they really are. Have you ever found out something that fundamentally altered your opinion of someone or something in your life? Please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you liked it.